Evening, dear ones. Welcome to our Kirtan. We will begin just after 7. Give us another couple minutes to finish setting up here. Thank you for joining us. So let's begin our Kirtan with prayer together. Please join me in us in praying inwardly and outwardly. Pray out loud if you feel to, and do this responsibly if we do. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
beloved friend God,
beloved friend God,
great masters,
great Master,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yoganandaji,
Paramhansa Yoganandaji,
saints and sages of all religions,
saints and sages of all religions,
lovingly we bow at thy feet.
lovingly we bow at thy feet.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
we are your instruments.
we are your instruments.
We open ourselves
We open ourselves
to your divine melody,
to your divine melody,
your rhythm and harmony.
your rhythm and harmony.
Play and sing through us
Play and sing through us
your blessing
your blessing
to all of creation.
to all of creation.
We offer you our heart's love.
We offer you our heart's love.
Come to us.
Come to us.
Om, peace,
Peace.
amen. In this kirtan, we sing to God, we sing with God. This is not just sort of an abstraction singing about God who is very far away and sort of in the mist and unknown. This is God very near. This is God right within, in the altar of our own hearts, in the altar of our aspirations. And so this evening, chant with us. Whether you sing out loud isn't so much the point. You know, if it's awkward for you wherever you are, if there are other people around or whatever, sing inwardly if you can't sing outwardly, but sing with us if you can sing outwardly. It's just a joy to be able to share this together, even if we're not together in the same room, which lends the human magnetism and joy of being able to be together in that way more, but it's still a blessing. Chanting is a blessing whether it's alone on a mountaintop or in a forest by yourself, just singing to the trees and the sky. It's a blessing wherever and whenever. So let's share this, share and claim this sacred space that we have in this evening. The week is, you know, if you want to define it this way, the week is over in a sense. The weekend is upon us. We can leave all, whatever led up to this moment, we can leave it all behind and just embrace the divine, embrace the sacred that we can share together. In the chanting that we'll do in the rhythm of the evening, We will sing several chants. There will be little pauses, minimal pauses between the chants, but those pauses are actually important. It's not just a chance for Nirmala and I to reset our instruments or get the next chant queued up. It's a chance to take the energy and the vibration of the chant that we just shared more deep within. So take that opportunity to kind of assimilate the chant, let it percolate within. And after 3 or 4 chants, we'll have a short meditation. Short meditation means, say, 3 to 5 minutes. And we'll tell some stories, and then later in the evening, we'll chant some more after the stories are over. So our first chant will be, Lord, I am thine. And just as a humorous aside, once in India, someone came very quizzically up and said, why do you sing, Lord, I am dying? I am not dying. And so we had to explain that it's, Lord, I am thine, as in, Lord, I am yours. Not, Lord, I am dying. We may all be dying, at different rates, but Lord, I am thine is the message of this chant. So let's enjoy singing to God and offering ourselves, but also invoking God's presence to come to us in the chant as well. next chant was originally written in Italian, but we'll just sing it in English tonight. How shall I love thee, Lord my God? With every breath I breathe. Just as a fire may burn a whole forest, burn to the root my desire. And then there are three other verses. The refrain is the same, but the three other verses are, how shall I seek thee, how shall I serve thee, and how shall I worship thee? Quando ti amerò, io Signore, tu alla mia. Quando ti amerò, io Signore,
Shall I see
Short meditation after this next chant. This is another chant by Swami Kriyananda. These first two were also, this one is called When I Awake. This is the chant of the Divine Mother. And when I awake, I see thy face. When I awake, I see thy light. Mother, awake from my dreams. Mother, awake in thy light. Hand in hand, we're dancing together in thy light. And the other two verses are, when I awake, I'll end all sorrows. When I awake, I'll know thy joy. The third verse is, when I awake, I'll end all fear. When I awake, I'll find thy love. share a story. I'll show the camera the mics a little bit here for just a moment.
So this is one of my favorite books of all time. The winner of the Newbery Award. It's called The Cat Who Went to Heaven. Once upon a time, in faraway Japan, a poor young artist sat alone in his little house waiting for his dinner. His housekeeper had gone to the market, and he sat sighing to think of all the things he wished she would bring home. He expected her to hurry in at any moment, bowing and opening her little basket to show him how wisely she had spent their few pennies. He heard her step and jumped up. He was very hungry. But the housekeeper lingered by the door, and the basket stayed shut. "Come," he cried, "what is in the basket?" The housekeeper trembled and held the basket tight in two hands. "It has seemed to me, sir," she said, "that we are very lonely here." Her wrinkled face looked humble and obstinate. "Lonely," said the artist. "I should think so. How can we have guests when we have nothing to offer them? It is so long since I have tasted rice cakes that I forgot what they taste like." And he sighed again, for he loved rice cakes and dumplings and little cakes filled with sweet bean jelly. He loved tea served in fine china cups, in company of some friend seated on flat cushions, talking perhaps about a spray of peach blossoms, standing like a little princess in the alcove. But weeks and weeks had gone by since anyone had bought even the smallest of his pictures. The poor artist was glad enough to have rice and a coarse fish now and then. If he did not sell another picture soon, he would not have even that. His eyes went back to the basket. Perhaps the old woman had managed to pick up a turnip or two, or even a peach too ripe to haggle long over. "Sir," said the housekeeper, seeing the direction of his look, "it has often seemed to me that I was kept awake by rats." At that, the artist laughed out loud. "Rats," he repeated. "Rats, my dear old woman. No rats come to such a poor house as this, where not even the smallest crumb falls to the mats." Then he looked at the housekeeper, and a dreadful suspicion filled his mind. "You have brought us home a cat, and nothing to eat," he said. "True, master," the woman said sorrowfully. "My master knows everything," answered the housekeeper, bowing low. Then the artist jumped to his feet and strode up and down the room and pulled his hair, and it seemed to him that he would die of hunger and anger. "A cat," he cried. "Have you gone mad? Here we are starving, and you must bring home a goblin to share the little we have and perhaps to suck our blood at night. Yes, it will be fine to wake up in the dark and feel teeth at our throats and look into the eyes as big as lanterns. But perhaps you are right. Perhaps we are so miserable, it would be a good thing to have us die at once and be carried over the ridgepoles in the jaws of a devil." "But master, there are many good cats too," cried the old woman. "Have you forgotten the little boy who drew all the pictures of cats on the screens of the deserted temple? and then went to sleep in a closet and heard such a racket in the middle of the night? And in the morning, when he woke again, he found the giant rat laying dead, master, the rat that had come to kill him. And who destroyed the rat? Sir, tell me that. It was his own cats. There they sat on the screen, just as he had drawn them, but there was blood on their claws. And he became a great artist like yourself. Surely there are many good cats, master. Then the old woman began to cry. The artist stopped and looked at her as the tears fell from her bright black eyes and ran down the wrinkles in her cheeks. Why should he be angry? He had gone hungry before. Well, well, he said, sometimes it is good fortune to have even a devil in the household. It keeps other devils away. Now I suppose this cat of yours will wish to eat. Perhaps it may arrange for us to have some food in the house. Who knows? We can't be worse off than we are. The housekeeper bowed very low in gratitude. There is not a kinder heart in the whole town than my master, she said, and prepared to carry the covered basket into the kitchen. But the artist stopped her. Like all artists, he was curious. Let us see the creature, he said, pretending he scarcely cared whether he saw it or not. So the old woman put down the basket and opened the lid. Nothing happened for quite a few moments. Then a round, pretty, white head came slowly above the bamboo, and two big yellow eyes looked about the room, and then a little white paw appeared on the rim of the basket. Suddenly, without moving the basket at all, the little white cat jumped out onto the mats and stood there as a person might stand who scarcely knew if she were welcome. Now that the cat was out of the basket, the artist saw that she had yellow and black spots on her sides and a little tail like a rabbit's, and that she did everything daintily. Oh, a three-colored cat, said the artist. Why didn't you say so from the beginning? They are very lucky, I understand. As soon as the little cat heard him speak so kindly, she walked over to him and bowed down her head as though she were saluting him, while the old woman clapped her hands for joy. The artist forgot that he was hungry. He had seen nothing so lovely as their cat for a very long time. She will have to have a name, he declared, sitting down again on the old matting while the cat stood sedately before him. Let us see. She is like new snow dotted with gold pieces and lacquer. She is like a white flower on which butterflies of two kinds have lighted. She is like, but here he stopped, for a sound like a tea kettle crooning on the fire was filling his little room. How contented, sighed the artist. This is better than rice. Then he said to the housekeeper, we have been lonely. I see that now. May I humbly suggest, said the housekeeper, that we call this cat Good Fortune? Somehow the name reminded the artist of all of his troubles. Anything will do, he said, getting up and tightening his belt over his empty stomach. But take her to the kitchen now, out of the way. No sooner were these words out of his mouth than the little cat rose and walked away, softly and meekly. The next morning, the artist found the cat curled up in a ball on his cushion. Ah, you found the softest place, I see, said he, and Good Fortune arose immediately, moving away, and began to wash herself with the greatest thoroughness and dexterity. When the housekeeper came back from market and cooked the small meal, Good Fortune did not go near the stove, though her eyes wandered toward it now and then, and her thistledown whiskers quivered slightly with hunger. She did happen to be present when the old woman brought in a low table and set it before her master. Next came a bowl of fish soup. Goodness knows how the housekeeper must have wheedled to get that fish. But Good Fortune made a point of keeping her eyes in the other direction. One would say, said the artist, pleased by her behavior, that she understood it is not polite to stare at people while they eat. She has been very properly brought up. From whom did you buy her? I bought her from a fisherman in the market, said the old woman. She is the eldest daughter of his chief cat. You know a junk never puts out to sea without a cat to frighten away the water devils. Ah, said the artist, a cat doesn't frighten devils, they are kin. The sea demons spare a ship out of courtesy to the cat, not from fear of her. The old woman did not contradict. She knew her place better than that. Good Fortune continued to sit with her face to the wall. The artist took another sip or two of soup, then he said to the housekeeper, Please be kind enough to bring a bowl for Good Fortune when you bring my rice. She must be hungry. When the bowl came, he called her politely. Having been properly invited, Good Fortune stopped looking at the other side of the room and came to sit beside her master. She took care not to eat hurriedly and soil her white, round chin. Although she must have been very hungry, she would eat only half the rice. It was as though she kept the rest for the next day, wishing to be no more of a burden than she could help. And so the days went. Each morning the artist knelt quietly on a mat and painted beautiful little pictures that no one bought. Some of warriors with 2 swords, some of lovely ladies doing up their long curtains of hair, some of the demons of the wind blowing out their cheeks, and some little laughable ones of rabbits running in the moonlight, or fat badgers beating on their stomachs like drums. While he worked, the old woman went to market. With a few of their remaining pennies, she spent the rest of her time in cooking, washing, scrubbing, darning, to keep their threadbare house and their threadbare clothes together. Good Fortune, having found that she was unable to help either of them, sat quietly in the sun, ate as little as she could, and often spent hours with lowered head before the image of the Buddha on the low shelf. She is praying to the enlightened one, said the housekeeper in admiration. She is catching flies, said the artist. You would believe anything wonderful of your spotted cat. Perhaps he was a little ashamed to remember how seldom he prayed now when his heart felt so heavy. But one day he was forced to admit that Good Fortune was not like other cats. He was sitting in his special room, watching sparrows fly in and out of the hydrangea bushes outside, when he saw Good Fortune leap from a shadow and catch a bird. In a second, the brown wings, the black-capped head, the legs like briars, the frightened eyes were between her paws. The artist would have clapped his hands and tried to scare her away, but before he had time to make the least move, he saw Good Fortune hesitate, and then slowly lift first one white paw and then another from the sparrow. Unhurt, in a loud whir of wings, the bird flew away. "What mercy!" cried the artist, and tears came into his eyes. Well he knew his cat must be hungry, and well he knew what hunger felt like. "I am ashamed when I think I called such a cat a goblin," he thought. "She is more virtuous than a priest." It was just then, at that very moment, that the old housekeeper appeared, trying hard to hide her excitement. "Master," she said, as soon as she could find words, "Master, the head priest from the temple himself is here in the next room and wishes to see you. What do you think his honor has come here for?" "The priest from the temple wishes to see me?" repeated the artist, scarcely able to believe his ears, for the priest was a very important person, not one likely to spend his time in visiting poor artists whom nobody thought much of. When the housekeeper had nodded her head until it nearly fell off, the artist felt as excited as she did, but he scarcely knew what to say, but he forced himself to be calm. "Run, run," he exclaimed to his housekeeper, "buy tea and cakes," and he pressed into the old woman's hands the last thing of value he owned, the vase that stood in the alcove of his room and always held a spray of flowers. But even if his room must be bare after this, the artist did not hesitate. No guest could be turned away without proper entertainment. He was ashamed to think that he had kept the priest waiting for even a minute and had not seen him coming and welcomed him at the door. He scarcely felt good fortune rub encouragingly against his ankles as he hurried off. In the next room, the priest sat, lost in meditation. The artist bowed low before him, drawing in his breath lightly, and then waited to be noticed. It seemed to him half a century before the priest lifted his head and the far-off look went out of his eyes. Then the artist bowed again and said that his house was honored forever by so holy a presence. The priest wasted no time in coming to the point. "We desire," said he, "a painting of the death of our Lord Buddha for the temple." There was some discussion as to the artist, so we put slips of paper, each marked with a name, before the central image in the great hall, and in the morning all the slips of paper had blown away except the one with your name. So we knew Buddha's will in the matter. "Hearing something of your circumstances, I have brought a first payment with me, so that you may relieve your mind of worry while you work. Only a clear pool has beautiful reflections. If the work is successful as we hope, your fortune is made, for what the temple approves becomes the fashion in the town." With that, the priest drew a heavy purse from his belt. The artist never remembered how he thanked the priest, or served him the ceremonial tea, or bowed him to the narrow gate. Here at last was a chance for fame and fortune. He felt that this might be all a dream. Why had the Buddha chosen him? He had been too sad to pray often, and the housekeeper too busy. Could it be that Buddha would listen to the prayers of a little spotted cat? He was afraid that he would wake up and find that the whole thing was an apparition and the purse was filled with withered leaves. Perhaps he never would have come to himself if he had not been roused by a very curious noise. It was a double kind of noise. It was not exactly like any noise that the artist had ever heard. The artist, who was always curious, went into the kitchen to see what could be making that sound. And there, sure enough, were the housekeeper and Good Fortune. The one was crying for joy, and the one was purring for joy. And it would have been hard to have said which was making more noise. At that, the artist had to laugh out loud, but it was not his old, sad kind of laugh. It was like a boy's laugh, and he took them both into his arms. Then there were 3 sounds of joy in the poor old kitchen. Early the next morning, before the sun was up, the housekeeper rose and cleaned the house. She swept and scrubbed until the mats looked like worn silver and the wood shone like pale gold. Then she hurried to the market and purchased a spray of flowers to put in the vase, which she had, of course, bought back the night before with the first money from the priest's purse. In the meantime, the artist dressed himself carefully in his holiday clothes, combed his hair, and then went to pray before the shelf of the Buddha. There sat Good Fortune already, looking very earnest. But she moved over the moment she saw her master. Together they sat before the image, the artist raising his hands and striking them softly from time to time to call attention to his prayers. Then with a low bow, he went into the next room and sat formally on his leg. He had never felt more excited and happy in his life. Today he was to begin his painting of the death of Buddha, to be hung in the village temple and seen perhaps by the children of his children's children. The honor of it almost overcame him, but he sat upright and expressionless, looking before him like a samurai knight receiving the instructions of his master. There were no rolls of silk near him, no cakes of ink with raised patterns of flowers on their tops, no beautiful brushes, nor jar of fresh spring water. He must strive to understand the Buddha before he could paint him. First he thought of the Buddha as Siddhartha, the young Indian prince, and the artist imagined that his poor small room was a great chamber. There were columns of gilded wood holding up a high ceiling above him. He imagined that he heard water falling from perfumed fountains nearby. He imagined that his poor hydrangeas were a forest of fruit trees and palms leading down to pools filled with pink and white lotuses, and that the sparrows he knew so well were white swans flying across the sky. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. The artist sat in his poor, worn clothes on his thin cushion and felt the silks of the palace against his skin. Heavy earrings weighed down his ears. A rope of pearls and emeralds swung at his throat. When Good Fortune came in, cautiously putting one paw before the other, he imagined that a dancing girl had come to entertain him, walking in golden sandals. His housekeeper scolded the cat. How wrong of you to disturb the master. But the artist was not disturbed. He was Prince Siddhartha, and he was still wondering if all the world was as happy as those who lived within the vine-covered walls of the palace that the king his father had given him. The second day began as the first. The housekeeper rose at dawn and cleaned every speck of their home, even though there was nothing dirty about it at all. Then she hurried to the market. The artist got up early too and made himself as worthy as possible of reflecting upon the life of the Buddha. And once more, when he went to pray, there was good fortune, shining like a narcissus, and gold as a narcissus's heart, and black as a beetle on a narcissus petal, sitting quietly before the shelf where sat the household image of the Buddha. No sooner did she see the artist than she jumped to her feet, lowered her head as though she were bowing, and moved over to make room for him. They meditated as before, the artist occasionally striking his hands softly to draw attention to his thoughts, and the cat sitting very still and proper with her paws side by side. Then the artist went into his room to reflect upon the renunciation of Siddhartha. Again he was the prince, but now he ordered his chariot for the first time to drive unannounced through the city. He saw an old man, a man sick with fever, and a dead man. He looked at his golden bracelets, but gold was no good to these now. He could not help those who were at last dying. The head of the artist hung heavy on his breast. He thought he smelled of garland of flowers, but the sweetness sickened him. They brought word that a son had been born to him, but his only thought was how life would be so sad for the child. When the housekeeper came in with rice, he sent her away without tasting it. And when good fortune wandered in with big, watchful eyes, he told her he was in no mood for entertainment. Evening drew closer, but still the artist did not stir. The housekeeper looked in, but went away. Good fortune mewed anxiously, but the artist did not hear her. For now the artist imagined that Prince Siddhartha had secretly sent for his chariot driver, Kantaka, his white horse. He had gazed long at his sleeping wife and the little baby she held in her arms. Now he was in the darkness of his garden. Now he rode quietly through the sleeping street. Now he was galloping down the long roads that shone pale and light in the darkness. And now he was in the forest and come to the end of his father's kingdom. Siddhartha had cut off his long hair. He had taken off his priestly garments. He had hung his sword to the white Kantaka's saddle. Then he let Chana, his servant, take his horse back to the palace. It is not with them that he can save the world from its suffering. So intensely had the artist lived through the pain of the prince in his hour of giving up all the beautiful world of his youth, that next morning he was very, very tired. But when he heard the housekeeper polishing and rubbing and sweeping and scrubbing, he too rose and dressed in his poor best and sat beside good fortune, praying before the image of the Buddha. Then he went to the room that overlooked the hydrangea bushes and the sparrows and sat again on the mat. Again he imagined that he was Siddhartha, but now he imagined for years he had wandered on foot, begging for food and seeking wisdom. At last he sat in a forest under a banyan tree, and the devils came and tempted him with sights terrible and sights beautiful. Just before dawn, it seemed to him that a great wisdom came to him, and he understood why people suffer and also how they can and other lives escape their suffering. With this knowledge, he became the enlightened one, the Buddha. Now the artist felt a great peace come over him and a love for all the world that flowed out even to the smallest grains of sand on the farthest beaches. As he had felt for his wife and his little son, the Buddha now felt for everything that lived and moved, and even for the trees and mosses, the rocks and the stones and the waves, which someday he believed would in their turn be men and would suffer and be happy as men. When the housekeeper and good fortune came with his food, the artist thought his first disciples had come to him, and he taught them of the way that they should follow. He felt himself growing old in teaching and carrying happiness throughout the land. When he was 80, he knew he was near death. And he saw the skies open and all the Hindu gods of the heavens and of the trees and the mountains with his disciples and with the animals of the earth. They all came to bid him farewell. But where's the cat? Thought the artist to himself. For even in his vision, he remembered that in none of the paintings he had ever seen of the death of the Buddha was a cat represented among the other animals. The cat refused homage to Buddha, he remembered. And so by her own independent act, only the cat has the doors of paradise closed in her face. Thinking of little good fortune, the artist felt a sense of sadness before he submerged himself again into the great pool of the peace of the Buddha. But poor man, he was tired to death. In 3 days, he had tried to live a whole marvelous life in his mind. Yet now at least he understood that the Buddha he painted must have the look of one who has been gently brought up and unquestioningly obeyed. That he learned from the first day. And he must have the look of one who has suffered greatly and sacrificed himself. That he learned from the second day. And he must have the look of one who has found peace and given it to others. That he learned on the last day. So knowing at last how the Buddha must look, the artist fell asleep and slept for 24 hours as though he were dead, while the housekeeper held her breath and the little cat walked on the tips of her white paws. At the end of 24 hours, the artist awoke, and calling hastily for brushes, ink, spring water, and a great roll of silk, he drew at one end the figure of the great Buddha reclining upon a couch, his face filled with peace. The artist worked as though he saw the whole scene before his eyes. It had taken him 3 days to know how the Buddha should look, but it took him less than 3 hours to paint him to the last fold of his garments, while the housekeeper and good fortune looked on with great respect and great admiration. In the following days, the artist painted the various gods of the earth and the sky and disciples who came to say farewell to the Buddha. Good fortune went softly about the house, quivering with excitement. She had plenty to eat these days. Her coat shone like silk. Her little whiskers glistened. I'm just going to finish the story. It may take the rest of our time together, but you have to know the ending. It worries me, said the old housekeeper. She doesn't seem like a cat. She doesn't try to play with the brushes, that I could understand. At night, all the things come back to me that you said when I brought her home in the bamboo basket. If she should turn out to be bad and hurt your picture, I shall not wish to live. Good fortune will bring no harm, he murmured before he forgot about them all, the cat, the old woman, and even his own hand that held the brush. The artist pondered which of the animals to paint first. There was the mighty lion, the elephant, and the horse. But then he remembered how the Buddha loved humble things, and the snails were the first to sacrifice themselves for the Buddha because they saw the Buddha sitting under a tree, lost in meditation. And then as the sun shifted, the sun came to beat down on the Buddha's bare head. And so the snails didn't want the Buddha to be interrupted or hurt. And so they crawled up the tree and they formed like a little hat on the Buddha's head with their cool, wet bodies. And so they protected the Buddha's head. And they were the first to sacrifice themselves for the Buddha. And so the artist painted the snail first. And just as he finished, good fortune came out of the artist's shadow to look at the painting. Her whiskers bristled and she put out one paw as though to pat the little snail, and then looked up at the artist. I am only playing, master, she seemed to say, but that is a very snail-like snail. Next, the artist sat on his mat and considered the elephant. He thought of the elephant's wisdom. He had never seen one himself, but he had seen pictures of them long ago painted by artists. And now he thought of a large white animal, very majestic, with small, kind eyes and long ears lined with pink. He remembered that the elephant was very sacred, having been a symbol of royalty in India. He thought of how Buddha's mother had dreamed of an elephant before her baby was born. So as the artist thought for a long time of the elephant's wisdom and dignity and kindness, he dipped a brush into spring water, touched it with ink, and drew an elephant. No sooner was the elephant drawn than good fortune came out and gazed round-eyed at the great creature standing upon the white silk. Then she looked up at the artist. I do not know what this being might be, master, but surely I am filled with awe from my whiskers to my tail. And then he imagined a horse, and he meditated long upon the beautiful horse Kantaka, and how Kantaka had helped him when he was winning the hand of his bride, and he, on his white horse, ran faster than all the other princes, and his horse helped him in winning his bride. And contemplating on this, he touched his brush to spring water and then to ink and drew a horse. And as soon as the horse was drawn, good fortune came and regarded the picture for a long time. She looked at the artist with admiration. If a fly should light upon your horse, master, she seemed to say, surely it would stamp and toss its head. The next day, the artist again closed himself alone in the room overlooking the hydrangea bushes. Sitting on his mat, he decided that above the white horse, a swan should be flying. He thought of the beauty of swans and the great beating of their wings, and how they followed their kings on mighty flights along the roads of the air. He thought how lightly they float in water like white lotuses. And he dipped his brush in spring water, touched it to ink, and drew a swan. And suddenly there was good fortune coming out of his shadow and looking at the swan long and well. Then she turned politely to the artist. Truly, there is wind under those wings, she seemed to say. But there was just a hint in her manner to suggest that she thought his time might be better employed than in drawing birds. It may be that the artist was a little annoyed with Good Fortune's reaction, for hardly knowing it himself, he had come to count on her praise. Yet it may have been pure chance that made him reflect next on dogs. He thought of how faithful they were, but he tried to remember some tale involving the Buddha, and he could think of none. So he called in his housekeeper, and his housekeeper told him a story from her village. There had been a ruined temple, and after the priests had left the temple, then demons and goblins came in and took over the temple. And they terrorized the village, and they demanded that a young maiden be given to them every year, or they would wreak havoc and destroy the whole village. And so year after year, the villagers had to sacrifice a young girl to these goblins. Well, one year, a soldier traveling to the village had spent the night outside the temple, this ruined temple, and he heard the goblins making a racket and saying, "Don't tell Shepatero, or we will be ruined." And so the next day, when the soldier came through the town and he saw that they were preparing to offer this young girl to the goblins, he said, "Well, who is Shepatero? I heard the goblins saying, 'Don't tell Shepatero.'" And this little dog started barking happily. It was his master, this young girl who was about to be sacrificed. And so instead of putting the girl in the basket to be carried to the temple, Shepatero jumped in himself. He wanted to go. And so they carried him to the temple. And the soldier stayed and was hidden while he watched the scene unfold. And the goblins pried open the basket, but instead of this young girl, there was Shepatero, and he leaped at the head goblin's throat and killed the head goblin, and then all the rest of them ran away in fear. And so the master says to the old woman after she tells the story, "Well, what form did the goblins take?" And the housekeeper, in a whisper, not wanting Good Fortune to hear, said to the master, "It took the form of..." But Good Fortune heard what she said. She looked at the housekeeper for a long time and then turned and walked out of the room. So the artist painted many creatures. One of them was the banyan deer. I've told you the story of the banyan deer before. When Good Fortune came out to see the painting of the banyan deer, she looked long at the picture. Meow, she said sadly, turning to the artist. Is there no room for me among the other animals, master? After that, the artist drew many creatures. In each of them, the spirit of the Buddha had at one time lived or had rendered him service during his time on earth. And as the painting of each animal was finished, Good Fortune came to look at it. And with each new drawing, she seemed sadder and sadder, and pulled with her little white paw at the sleeve of her master, looking up all the time into his face. He even knew that the tiger was among those who had come to bid farewell to the master. But he couldn't understand how such a fierce creature could be blessed by the Buddha. And then he remembered how devoted a tiger is to her cubs, and how the tiger will face any danger. And it may be, he thought, that there is a fierceness in love, and a love in fierceness. The Buddha had taken the form of a tiger to prove that even in a savage life, there is something of greatness. And so when he painted the tiger, Good Fortune came out from his shadow. She trembled as if to say, if the tiger can come to bid farewell to the Buddha, surely the cat, who is little and so gentle, surely the cat may come too, oh master. Surely you will next paint the cat among the animals who were blessed by the Holy One when he died. The artist was much distressed. Good Fortune, I would gladly paint a cat if I could, but all people know that cats, though lovely, are usually proud and self-satisfied. Alone among the animals, the cat refused to accept the teachings of the Buddha. She alone of all creatures was not blessed by him. It is perhaps in grief that she too often consorts with goblins. Then Good Fortune laid her little round head against his breast and meowed like a crying child. He comforted her as well as he could and called for the housekeeper. Buy her a fine fish all for herself. Do not let her come here again until the picture is gone. She will break both our hearts. And how tired the artist looked. There were assembled gods now and disciples around the picture of the dying Buddha, and all the animals gathered with this welling up of love and blessing the death of the Buddha. But something was excluded. From the kitchen, the artist heard the faint mewing of the cat and the housekeeper's voice. The artist imagined how his little cat felt, so gentle, so sweet, but cursed forever. All the other animals might receive the Buddha's blessing and go to heaven, but the little cat heard the doors of nirvana closed before her. Tears came to his eyes. I cannot be so hard-hearted, he said. If the priest wished to refuse the picture as inaccurate, Let them do so. I know how to starve. He took up his best brush, dipped it in spring water, touched it with ink, and last of all the animals, he drew a cat. Then he called his housekeeper. Let good fortune come in, he said. Perhaps I have ruined us, but at least I can make her happy. In came good fortune the moment that the door was slid open. She ran to the picture and looked as though she could never look enough. Then she gazed up at the artist with all her love and gratitude. And then good fortune fell dead, filled with too much joy to continue to live. Little good fortune went to heaven. The next morning, hearing that the picture was finished, the priest came to see it. After the first greetings, the artist led him in to look at the painting. The priest gazed long. How it shines, he said. Then his face hardened. But what is that animal whom you have painted last of all? It is a cat, said the painter, and his heart felt heavy with despair. Do you not know, asked the priest sternly, that the cat rebelled against our Lord Buddha and did not receive his blessing and cannot enter heaven? Yes, I knew, said the artist. Each person must suffer the consequences of his own acts, said the priest. The cat must suffer from her obstinacy and you from yours. As one can never erase work once done, I will take the painting and tomorrow officially burn it. Some other artist's picture must hang in our temple. All day the housekeeper wept in the kitchen, for in bringing the little cat home she had, after all, ruined her master. All day the artist sat in the room beside the hydrangeas and thought. His painting was gone, and with it that part of his life that he had put into it. Tomorrow the priest would harshly burn it in the courtyard of the temple. Less than ever would anyone come to him now. He was ruined and all his hopes gone. But he did not regret what he had done. For so many days had he lived in the thought of love and the examples of sacrifice, that it did not seem too hard to suffer for good fortune's great moment of happiness. All night he sat in the darkness, open-eyed with his thoughts. The old woman dared not interrupt. He saw the pale light enter through the blinds and heard the dawn wind in the hydrangea bushes. An hour later, he heard the noise of people running toward his house. The priests of the temple surrounded him, and the head priest pulled at his sleeve. Come, come, they kept crying. Come, sir. It is a miracle. Oh, the compassion of the Buddha. Oh, the mercy of the Holy One. Dazed and breathless, the artist followed them. Seeing nothing of the village or the road or the temple, he heard happy voices in his ears. He caught a glimpse of the old housekeeper. Altogether they poured into the temple. There hung his picture with incense and candles burning before it. It was just as he had remembered it, but the artist sank down to his knees with a cry. Oh, the compassion of it. For where the last animal had stood was now only white silk that seemed never to have felt the touch of ink. And the great Buddha, the Buddha whom he had painted, reclining with hands folded upon his breast. The Buddha had stretched out an arm in blessing. And under the holy hand knelt the figure of a tiny cat with pretty white head, bowed in happy adoration. I hope you didn't mind such a long story.
Well, dear ones, we will close with chanting. Now let's send out odes of compassion and love to all the world. God bless you all.